Growing up, like when I was a little kid, my imaginary friends were Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Like that's who I hung out with in the driveway.
What's up, everybody? I'm Richie O'Reilly, and this is the Pop Network's breakdown of The Last Dance. Joining me today, I've got my good buddies, roommates, and friends, Tim Carter and Jordan Herbstman, and our Chicago native himself, Scott Sandalow. Guys, that doc was amazing. What's everybody's background here? What's your touch point? Because for me, the majority of this stuff was new outside of the stats and the legacy.
As you said, I'm Chicago native. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I was a kid and kind of a teenager in the early to mid '90s. So I had a front row seat to all of this. I went to a lot of games. I obviously watched everything on TV. So this this brought back a lot of old memories, but it also gave me a lot of new things to think about.
Tim, as our basketball guy, what do you got?
Yeah, man. I mean, growing up, like when I was a little kid, my imaginary friends were Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Like that's who I hung out with in the driveway. And my sister used to make fun of me, and I hated her for it. I remember I got a Barnes & Noble gift card for Christmas, as that it has to be. And I found this Michael Jordan like docu-series. It's called like Ultimate Jordan. It's 3 discs.
I have that.
Yeah, so great. It's got like 20 hours of footage, like his 5 best games. Love that. I wore a red armband on my left arm. Yeah, my left arm, even though my team colors in middle school were blue and gold, like diehard MJ fan.
Jordan, you like me? You didn't know anything?
Yeah, it was all pretty new for me. I knew about Michael Jordan, the basketball player, and talking to my dad when I first got into basketball, I asked him a lot about LeBron versus Jordan, like what are the differences? So I knew about his playing style and his drive to win, but that was pretty much it. And I definitely didn't know anything about the rest of the team.
Yeah, that's kind of the first thing I want to get into too, is the development of his character and how they framed this show. I thought, for me personally, episodes 7 and 8 were the pinnacle of learning about Michael Jordan as a person. Those episodes were super emotional, part with him tearing up at the end of episode 7. I think that was the best insight for me into, holy crap, like this guy was everything that everybody said about him.
Yeah, I think you kind of forget, after all this time passed, about the level of drive that he had. And then obviously coming from Chicago, you'd hear these kind of like old wives' tales or these things, stories about Jordan that like, at the time you couldn't really prove if they were true, or you had no idea if they were actually happening. And now, like, looking back at what I've heard and then hearing what I'm hearing through this, I'm assuming that list was being written since he was probably coming out of the womb of everyone that he had to correct that wronged him. So I pretty much believe everything that I've heard growing up.
Yeah, I mean, the guy was a robot. There's this awesome story of him in the '96 finals against the Sonics, and he game day plays 36 holes of golf, gets McDonald's, and drinks a ton of beer, and then goes out and like wins the game that night. Words can't describe it, honestly.
The LeBradford Smith thing is the funniest thing in the world to me. That this dude absolutely bodied this poor guy for no reason for like 10 years before admitting that he made the whole thing up. Like, that's so petty. That is next level.
And there's probably so many more stories like that that were left out. I'm sure, like, again, this wasn't probably just on the basketball court. This was playing golf. This was poker. This was like someone who bumped into him, someone who cut him off. Like, I'm sure, for this 10-part documentary, you could have made a whole separate one on people that he just screwed over at some time during his life. But it was really entertaining to see.
Yeah, I honestly thought it was almost gonna be worse. Like I was expecting more of episodes 7 and 8, and he's like yelling at players in practice and like harassing these guys. I was expecting more of that, honestly. I don't know if you guys remember, but a lot of it was like, oh, like this is gonna put a whole new light on MJ. Everyone's gonna see him differently and like all that stuff. And I was like, no.
Agreed.
Yeah, if anything, I think it helped him because it made him more of a person than anything else, as opposed to just this guy that wanted to win and was really good at basketball. It gave him more of a personality, and you kind of see his unique personality play out.
Yeah, it still sounded a little bit, for as much as, like you said, it was, not as contentious as people maybe thought. I think a little deeper, some of the other folks who were being interviewed were kind of on message with Jordan as well, in terms of saying just enough to make it controversial and get a soundbite, but not enough to really make people think twice about something. So I think for as risky as it could have been a lot riskier.
Yeah. Are there any stories out there that are like his teammates are just like, yo, F this guy, I strongly dislike playing with this guy?
There's one that stands out actually in Luke Longley, who is like the starting center for the Bulls, has like notoriously been very quiet about Michael Jordan. And he's like, the few things he said, he's like, oh, like we've never been close friends, blah, blah, blah. But like, they didn't end up going out to Australia to interview him, all these different things. And he's kind of been like the one guy from that second three-peat that has like always been very quiet, and you can kind of tell he has an opinion, but he's not saying it because he can't be like the one person in the world.
Right.
Jordan.
Well, still, that's actually interesting though that he would be quiet about that. My man Scott Burrell, somebody tweeted he's showing all the symptoms of being absolutely bullied, and it's not funny, but it is funny. Kind of sad. Like MJ walks in the room and he like puts his head down and kind of shuffles. And it's like kind of sad, but it's also pretty funny because he turned out okay, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to Twitter, unfortunately or fortunately, I went on a little bit of a thread about, I think people in the business world kind of seeing how Michael Jordan acted as a leader and kind of trying to take some of that as motivation for how they'd be in the workplace. But I think it's kind of similar to, when people send in Navy SEALs to train their, team who works at a real estate office or something. Like, there's not much that you can really relate to what your job is to what someone like Jordan is and how he's teaching. So I think people need to exercise caution with, keeping in context his leadership to just a basketball court or a sport, because I think it can get into kind of a dangerous territory if you're looking to lead that way.
Yeah, I would be super pissed if somebody came in and started just guns blazing every morning, shitting on them. So angry every day.
For sure.
Not flat outside of the sports environment at all.
Exactly, for sure.
Scott Burrell probably feels the same in the sports environment.
R.I.P.
He thought he was in the clear, and he just gets another drive-by in this last episode.
I mean, I wonder what kind of coach he is, to be honest, because he's coaching, right? So, like, I'm curious if he, is completely laid back, or if he's someone who, like, takes some of what Jordan, taught him.
Supposedly, he's, like, one of the nicest people in the world. Like, that's what Jason Hare said. Like, Jason Hare has talked multiple times about how Scott Burrell is, like, incredibly nice.
Yeah.
So I assume, like, that's probably I don't know.
Well, I saw that whole hard-out strategy clearly didn't work on him too well, because in game 6 he was a minus 17 on the score. So zeros all across the board, minus 17.
Incredible. Yeah.
So, didn't work. What was our favorite interview outside of Jordan himself? There were some incredible appearances here, but I think a couple of them maybe stood out for us.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Reggie Miller interview at the end, it's interesting because apparently it was like Reggie didn't want to do this at all. He didn't want to be interviewed. Apparently Jason Hare had to call him like 10 different times, email him all this stuff, because it's like super painful for Reggie, as it is probably for so many other guys. But I just thought it's such this like combination of admiration and respect, but also you can tell like he's still salty and still like and he was like, we were the better team. Like, I firmly believe that to this day we had the better, like all this stuff. And like his quote, like the Black Jesus thing, like that. Oh my gosh, so good. And it's fun too because you just know who Reggie is. But obviously there's so many good interviews, but Reggie was one that stood out to me.
Yeah, I think Isaiah Thomas for me was one of the more interesting one, because he's really interesting when he talks, because he has this kind of like nervous either laugh, or it's something that seems to kind of make him appear a little bit even kind of creepier in the way that he was describing stuff. So like he comes off as this like kind of nice, like laughing, like jovial dude, but like the way he, was acting on the court and the things that he was saying, seemed, vaguely evil in the sense of how he was doing them. And I think, the difference between the way he told the story and the way Michael Jordan told the story were really interesting, because from what I'd heard before, like there were parts of their relationship that was friendly, and this seemed to not have any aspect of that. So it could just be a couple of these guys just giving each other shit. But I think the way, the dichotomy of their interviews is really interesting to me.
His playing days and his current form do not align with, for me, whatsoever. Being on the Bad Boys, and now he seems like the A-Rod of basketball, where he's like extremely polished and
still hateable in a similar way to A-Rod.
The other one that I know we all kind of enjoyed was the Tim Grover, Jordan's trainer interviews. the fact that he had this guy crying about how hard he wanted to work with, like that MJ quote, "I have an obligation to give you my best all the time. I'll see you tomorrow." That's next level stuff. Like to make a grown man 20 years later cry about how hard another person worked, that's stupid for me. That's insane.
Oh my God, nuts. One of the other interviews that I love, like Steve Kerr, total winner of this. Like everybody loved Steve Kerr before, and like everybody loves Steve Kerr even more. Like Steve Kerr, well done.
On another note, there's a lot of sad backstories on this Bulls team with Kerr's dad, Jordan's dad. I'm honestly a little surprised they didn't talk about it all, although I see that the start of their relationship probably wasn't super strong.
I mean, but you look at it too, and like, there's not really anyone who's good friends with Jordan who like played with him for a while. Honestly, I mean, like Charles Oakley was, but that was early on.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you look back at it, no one's like good buddies with Michael Jordan who played with him for an extended period of time.
No, yeah, that's a good point. I think there's a lot of, I think, celebrities as well have this too, where, no matter how many people you have around you, you can be so lonely. And I think there were parts of him that, as centered and as popular as he was, I think it's, the shots where you're in your own hotel room by yourself for hours and hours on end and you can't leave. And I understand the burden and the, sacrifice you have to be at his level, but it must be very difficult to have that reality for your whole kind of late adolescence into your days when you're a senior citizen. He's gonna have to live for the rest of his life, and I think it's it's sad in a lot of ways, and you could really see how it affected him.
Yeah, his best friend was his security guard. Like, that's pretty sad. That's tough. Less sad, the show was the ultimate meme factory.
Yeah.
Did we have a couple favorites here? Because I spent the entire 2 hours every week just popping off on Twitter looking for the next meme.
My favorite meme for the entire thing is the Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah.
I fit the criteria, but I just wasn't chosen.
I don't know what went into that process. I met the criteria to be selected, but I wasn't.
Just like for jobs, for dating, like all these things, I die every time. And there's something about like Isaiah Thomas's voice in the whole thing too. It's just so like, you just like feel it. You're like, yeah, like I've had that exact same feeling before.
I think that's one of those that's gonna stick around. Like I think some of these are pretty limited to now, but I think that one's got some long legs on it. Honestly, I think that one could stick around for a while.
So
yeah, I think it's cool that, again, as much as we maybe knew a lot of this stuff before, but like to actually hear Michael Jordan swear, those are the ones that are taking off. Again, like you said, every episode they might have a short shelf life, but like looking at the iPad, like I think, the biggest comeback story is like how you never thought Michael Jordan could replace a crying Jordan meme. And now like he's so epic, like he's even replaced one of his epic memes, and like only someone like Michael Jordan can do that. And that's like the epitome of like the internet plus media plus basketball plus Michael Jordan, like 2020 story to me. Like Michael Jordan replaced his own meme, and that's like the biggest like underdog story of the whole thing.
That's what's so crazy too, though. But he also, you're on a next level of fame when your security guard memeing your famous act becomes the next big meme. That security guard shrug blew up the internet. And I think that's another one with legs, because it's like, that's the funny part about this meme, is because it's a guy that you know nothing about who is now mimicking the guy you know everything about. Yeah. I think that one's amazing. And
absolutely.
That story, that little bit of the doc was awesome for me too. The one guy who beats him in flipping coins. I don't even know what that game was.
Just who can get going closest to the wall without touching.
Yeah, right.
That simple.
Yeah, but Jordan was so pissed at this freaking security guard for beating him in coins before a game. He was like, let's play again.
I think the one that I like, probably like my top three. It's hard to choose my favorite one, but the Rodman studying rebound, just boom, boom, there.
Boom, click and go back this way. Boom, here, click and go that way. Boom, that way. Click here and go like this way.
Like on a total another level where you could tell this guy just like studied rebounding, but he just felt like it was his job. It wasn't like his hobby. It was like, all right, I'm gonna study rebounding. Because then you see other parts of him where he skips practice to go to WWE. So it's just like another component of his life. Like wake up, have breakfast, study rebounds, and then go on to something else crazy.
So what's our takeaway from him from this whole thing?
I think maybe a full episode was probably more than enough on him. Like, I think you could have given him the same amount of time you gave Kerr, because even here, like, I mean, he was a novelty here when it was happening. So like, you'd see him all over merchandise, like, you know, you'd hear the worm, like you'd see 91 jerseys everywhere, but he wasn't like a focal point. Like, he was enough of a sideshow for it to maybe continue of being a sideshow in the doc. Again, like, it was interesting stuff, and you know, I think we learned a lot about him, but I think you could probably have shaved about 25 minutes of Rodman off the dock.
I agree with that. I think he definitely had like new light brought upon him. For me, like, I always just knew him as Kim Jong-un's best friend and like a really good defender, but I never knew like some of the crazy stories, like the Vegas story, the WWE story. So I think that there was a lot of good information on him, but I agree that the whole episode probably wasn't necessary and they could have shaved it off.
Yeah, the 30 for 30 on him is super interesting.
It is, yeah.
And that deserves its own time.
And I think too, like, it's a great point, the 30 for 30 episode. If that hadn't come out, you know, however many months ago, and it wasn't still kind of recent in your mind, you might be like, oh, like the Jordan or the Rodman story deserves more time. But because we all kind of just heard that, however long ago that was, and I thought Ryan Russillo and Bill Simmons made a pretty good point. They were like, dude, like, we keep hearing the same thing with Rodman over and over and over again. Like, no one understood you, and that's why you acted out. It's like, okay, well, what's next?
And I think as well, you know, this is a last, like, kind of a, you know, in the sports world point that I learned the most about Rodman in the last episode. I was actually a little pissed watching, you know, after he went to fight for New World Order in WCW in, you know, during, you know, the playoffs, the media relations assistant to the media relations person snuck him out of the back door. To me, like, that is not a good service to these journalists who are following a team for years and years. Like, I was a little bit annoyed seeing that, actually. And I know it's not a big detail, but it's something like where if I'm covering this team and you're sneaking people out, you know, I'm curious what else you're doing with that team.
No, that is interesting. And like, you would totally be bummed as a media person if you're like, well, you know, we want to talk to him. We know he's not going to say anything, but you give us 5 minutes with him. But the thing with the Russillo and Simmons comment too, though, Tim, is I think they phrased it horribly wrong. The way that the quote came out was they said Dennis Rodman is not interesting, and that's just like completely false. He's extremely interesting. If you want to, you could run endless psychology tests on this guy. It's the fact that there's nothing new coming out about him that is not interesting, that you haven't already heard about this guy.
Yeah, it just kind of seems like it's like same shit, different day type of thing. I think it'd be one thing too, like, if you didn't know that he left and skipped practice in the middle of the finals to go like, do a wrestling thing, you'd be like, why would you do that? And I don't know. I just, yeah, interesting story for sure. I'm a little bit over it now, but yeah.
Interesting story. But again, like, there's different touch points to this, right? Like, you and Bill Simmons, Ryan Russillo, people who knew this team a lot better. Yeah, for sure. But like for Jordan and I,
yeah,
a little bit different touch point for sure.
Oh, for like a huge, like a majority of the population, it's it's perfect.
The other guy that I thought had a weird arc in this whole thing was Scottie Pippen. I think he came off the first couple episodes like, oh my gosh, this guy was the man, and he's getting so underpaid. What's wrong with this guy? For like, how did they treat him like this? And by the end, I feel like he kind of like, you know, the whole quitting mid-game thing, it's kind of like, that's not a great look. And some of the other stuff he did, the surgery, it's like every part of it, you're like, dude, I totally feel you. But the other part of you is like, you can't do that.
Yeah, I remember when he sat out for that final play, and that's something that, you know, I'm looking at this doc as moments that, like, what their impact would be on social media if social media was around when this was out. To me, that's one that kind of stuck out the most, because I remember how it was covered from, you know, a news standpoint in Chicago. And yeah, I think that was something that was, you know, incredibly regrettable. But I think he's someone who kind of just spent his life and his career with the Bulls feeling so rightly undervalued. He didn't really have a better way to voice like his passive aggression, and I think it boiled over to a point that was clearly something that was overboard. But it seemed like he just didn't know what else to do mentally or emotionally.
Yeah. Do you like? I think it's interesting because MJ makes the point of like, he says like, this is gonna ruin Scottie, like this is gonna stick with him forever and like haunt him, whatever. But someone like Jordan and Richie, I'm curious what you guys think. Like, did you guys know about this? Like, do you think it actually like ruined his reputation or not? Like, how did you guys feel about that?
I didn't know about it. I don't know if it ruined his reputation. Like, if somebody had to ask me about like, what do you think of Scottie Pippen? I think it's just kind of like a blip over his career for me.
I heard about it, but yeah, I mean, it bummed me out because like I did kind of want him to be that. I totally forgot that it was a thing. So as I was watching those first couple episodes, I was like, oh, dude, I love this guy. And then the more of that stuff kind of kept coming, I was kind of like, ah, man, okay, so he's definitely not as rock solid as I would have thought. Yeah, it bummed me out. Am I going to say he's a terrible teammate? No, he's still sick. He's still like the best number 2 ever. I'm not going to take that away from him, but a little bit of a bummer for sure. Let's do some quick winners and losers of this whole thing. Obvious winner, MJ. If he said he was going to come out looking worse from this, I think this has swayed a ton of people in our generation that he's now the best player of all time.
Yeah, to me, I mean, ones that seemed a little less obvious, but I think guys that kind of further cemented themselves in their classiness, like Bird and Magic were pretty big winners to me. The way that, you know, they told stories of victory and defeat to Jordan and that Bulls team in the 80s and then the early 90s, obviously, compared to the way that someone like Isaiah Thomas told those stories. I think they were 2 guys who understood the role of marquee players passing a torch to someone, and they were, you know, from a timing standpoint, they understood that responsibility, and then from just a talent standpoint, they knew what they were up against with Jordan. They kind of were there to teach and guide him instead of be a barrier. So I think those 2 really showed their true colors during this.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think one of the biggest losers is Jerry Reinsdorf. And I think that he has this, he's like trying to come off as like, I'm the good guy here, and like I'm the one who
100%
who brought Phil in and all this stuff, and I'm the one. I called Phil after the season was over, and I said, you can come back, and like all this stuff. And I'm like, but ultimately, like, you were in charge of this whole thing.
Yes.
And you could have easily been like, hey, Krause, nope, like, you're gone. We're keeping these guys, blah, 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 like all these things. Totally on it. And he just, like, every single time he talked, it just kind of seemed like he was trying to sell this agenda of like, I'm the good guy here, and I'm the likable one. And it just totally, like, for me, it just flopped. And I feel like everyone just kind of saw right through it. And it was just like, no, dude, like, you played a big role in this as well. And you don't deserve all the credit for bringing Phil on for that last year and paying him $6 million and all that stuff. Like, it was like, I don't know. I was mad at Reinsdorf for that, just because Krause is getting dragged through the mud. And like,
he can't defend himself.
Totally. And I think like part of it, like, like he let his ego get the best of him and break up the greatest dynasty ever. But at the same time, like, he also put that dynasty together.
It was very like, I'm the owner, hands-off approach. If I need to fix things, I showed that I cared and put some effort into it. But like you said, everybody kind of saw through that. There was a lot of things he could have done differently to save that team if he really wanted to.
It was like whenever anything good happened, it was my doing. Whenever anything bad happened, it wasn't. I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, dude.
Not ideal leadership. A couple more winners. Phil Jackson, I think he came off great in this. I think he obviously has the legacy already, and there wasn't like any of the weird stuff that he got into later.
Yeah, I'm curious with Phil too, like what happened, because like losing the plot, the way he lost the plot, like later with the Knicks, and how that all went down. But two, like if his brand of coaching or his management style would play today in the NBA. My guess is it probably would, because he wasn't really a hard ass. But I'm curious, like how his aura and his vibe would translate to today's NBA.
My reaction to that, Tim, I want to hear your opinion on this. I would think, I don't know if the basketball would fit, but I think that's something that can be adaptable. I think him as a coach would be a great fit, because he's just a total players guy, and I think that's more than anything what people want now. Nobody wants what you now have in Chicago. I know. Sergeant. Like that's the opposite of what people want these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like it's not like he was known as being a bad X's and O's guy. Like he's always been like a pretty good X's and O's guy. But I think like his biggest strength is managing personalities, and I think that now more than ever, like managing personalities is huge, and because everyone has like their own personality, like more so now because it's like their own brand. And so I think that him managing personalities is like his biggest strength, and kind of like in the NBA now that you kind of need however many superstars to win a championship, I think it would still fit pretty perfectly.
Yeah, that's why the whole Knicks thing was super weird. But
Jack into the net.
Yeah. Loser, Adidas and Reebok. Adidas, that's pretty clear, took a huge L on this one. Another loser we had here, LeBron's GOAT status. I'm assuming you wrote that, Tim?
I wrote that. I will go to my grave saying that MJ is the GOAT. unless LeBron does some crazy things. I think the reason why is because I think it educated on a lot of people. Not only was Michael Jordan like insanely good and his stats are like unbelievable, like crazy defensively, offensively, everywhere, but mentally he just dominated everybody, and people knew they were going to lose before the game started. And like he was just so terrifying and impactful that I think that the series did like a decent job of showing. And I think that a lot of younger people who haven't tried to just like soak up as much MJ footage as possible don't realize that. You see the 98 All-Star game and he's like in that locker room and he's like older but still a stud, and like all these All-Stars, the best guys in the league, are just like hanging on his every word. And they're just like, oh my gosh, this is Michael Jordan. Like, okay, like we're so like enamored. And I think like to me, like that will just like cement his GOAT status. And I think that was like I think it did a good job of kind of showing people that who didn't know that before.
I think someone else who comes off, well, who, depending on how you look at it, will maybe come off not as well, is Sam Smith. And I think to have the courage as a Chicago journalist, and now he actually, works for the Bulls properly on the website. So I think it's really interesting. But for someone to have the courage to, not only ask maybe questions that other journalists wouldn't ask because they want to be friends, he wrote a whole book that, I think asked a lot of questions at a time when a lot of people weren't asking a lot of questions. And considering what he said afterwards, that, his relationship with Jordan was, in a sense, not even ruined because, as competitive as Jordan was on the court, you had someone like Sam Smith, this like tough New York journalist who's going to be just as competitive, in the newspaper or in print. So I really respect someone during that time, when everyone else was afraid to be checked, someone who was going in and looking for things that other people weren't looking for. So to me, he came off as a big winner.
Well, speaking of bad journalism and asking questions, I think a loser here was conspiracy theories. I think this pretty much quieted a lot of those for a lot of people. Like the whole MJ was suspended, MJ's dad was killed in a gambling plot. People are seriously in the weeds on some of these, and I think this pretty much shut that down for a lot of people. Well, I guess, it's a conspiracy theory for a reason. You'll never know, but
he's not sure.
yeah.
Maybe the partial thing, like he wasn't getting suspended for the whole season, but 20 games or 40 games or 60 games. That's maybe more believable. But
I think that's definitely way more likely. The chances of him being 18 months suspended by, like, the reason that the league is making all this money, that part.
Yeah, and I think going back to the suspension too, another winner is Jordan's baseball skills. I think, a lot of people who don't play baseball see a 202 batting average, but I think people who have never played baseball, and I posted about this before, if they were to see one curveball or one fastball or one slider, they'd never go into a batter's box again. Yeah. And I think to hit 202 and then what Reinsdorf said, that if it's true or not, someone who maybe in 18 months could have gone to the big leagues with the White Sox, I think he was pretty spectacular as a baseball player. And, I hope people understand the difficulty of what he did.
Dude. And in Double-A too, right?
In Double-A, the most talent.
He skipped every other level up to that and didn't play for 12, however many years it was. When I was in high school, if I took a season off and tried to come back, I don't even think I'd hit over 100. I don't know how he did it after skipping 12 years. That's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, and in the fact that Terry Francona, who like obviously extremely successful manager, was like, if you would have given this guy 1,500 at-bats, he would have made it.
Yeah, baseball is really, really freaking hard, man.
It is. It's really hard.
For anybody who doesn't think that this is impressive, like, you have no idea.
Yeah, I'm curious who he played against too. I'd love to see the guys that he's played against or hit against, or who what their careers turned out to be. And that's maybe for another show, but I'd be really curious to see his peers at that time.
Yeah. Richie, what does the baseball world think of Michael Jordan playing baseball before this doc? Were they like, oh, like he was just a hack, like he couldn't cut it, like it was just a publicity thing? Like we're like,
yeah. I think it's a little bit of both. It's like, okay, it's cool he came and played baseball, but I think you also have a little bit of that Tim Tebow vibe where it's like, okay, why does this guy think he can now come and pick up our sport? Even I was a little weird about the Tim Tebow thing, because it's like, this is a really freaking hard sport, man, and like you think you can just take all this time off and show up and start playing. A part of the baseball community is definitely really defensive of people don't understand how hard the sport is to begin with, and now another athlete's going to come in here and just actually do pretty well. It's kind of hard to mentally get your head around.
Yeah, totally.
I think it's just one loser that came out of it, and not specifically in the doc, but just bringing back the debates of trying to compare teams from different eras. It happened when the Warriors won 73 games, and we could beat this team wouldn't beat us. And then now Draymond speaking unnecessarily, saying stupid things, but it's just like a tired debate where you can't really compare teams from different eras. And I know Richie's on the side of just like appreciate the team for being great in that era, because the game doesn't translate. If you look at the charts that Kirk Goldsberry's making, where Jordan's shots are coming from versus where like a Heat map for now, the 3-pointer like was pretty non-existent compared to what it is now. So it's just really hard to compare teams from across eras.
Yeah, there's no way to fully know. You can make your assumptions. Like I'm on the side that if you picked up MJ and put him in today's game, he would learn how to shoot a 3-pointer. Like, that's not something I really have a question about. But there's really no way of knowing that because he didn't shoot a ton of threes back then.
Well, also kind of a little known fact, he has a rap as a bad 3-point shooter, which if you take his whole career, he wasn't like fantastic. It's like mid-30s, not great. But in his last couple of seasons with Bulls, he was like, in his last season, he was a 42% 3-point shooter. He didn't shoot a ton of them, but like the dude is really good. Like the dude could shoot him when it counted.
And yeah, if someone told him, in 1995, like, dude, you can't shoot threes, he would have like killed that guy, and then like won a 3-point contest and had the best 3-point percentage in the league. So like the game just wasn't ready to tell him he needed to do that.
And there's so many different things you have to factor in. Like people, okay, you're like, oh, this team would beat this team. It's like, okay, well, what rules are we playing in? Are we playing when you can hand check? Are we playing when you can't hand check? Like all these different things that come into it. I'm like, did Draymond Green talk trash to Michael Jordan before the game happened, or did he stay quiet? Like we don't know. Like all these things that like there's just
like
so
the
many
bad boy
things.
Pistons would not be able to do anything today that they did back then. So like, how can you even compare what they were allowed to do versus what defenses can do now?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's pointless.
I want to end with our favorite story, our favorite concept, the thing you want to take away from this or want to learn more about. And for me, the clear answer is the Jordan Dome on Space Jam. That sounded so sick. And I did listen to Bill Simmons talk about this. He said he tried to ask his friends who filmed it, like, can I get this footage for this? I want to see the footage of these games. And they were like, it doesn't exist. Like what you saw was essentially all we have, which is the biggest crime I've ever heard, because those games must have been incredible. I mean, the players in attendance, the celebrity factor around it, the fact that they just had this court there just for these dudes, and there was just 100 legends just sitting on the sidelines waiting to play. That sounds too good to be true.
I mean, to me, my biggest takeaway for it, and not even something I'm looking to learn more about, something that I just appreciated, as I grew up with it, like, each year, and I think the documentary framed it really well, is you had these new challengers coming in who were almost these like mythical figures that Jordan and the Bulls had to topple over. And I remember, following those each year that I grew up, and remembering these role players on these teams who like a Xavier McDaniel, like a Brian Russell, or like a John Starks, or he was a role player, but like all these guys, like they brought back so many memories of my childhood, and each year being like this new adventure with these new foes. And it kind of turned into watching a movie to me, or like reading like my parents reading me a book. It was like Space Jam in real life, to be honest. And I think that's what kind of made this so special for me.
Xavier McDaniels, former Sonic.
Oh, jeez.
Got to throw that in there as a Seattle guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like, you wouldn't think of like Xavier, or just seeing these videos and like, there's these guys that would never even have stories, if not for this. And I remember, every one of those stories. So that's kind of what made it just extra special.
I think for me, the coolest thing, one of my favorite parts, is just seeing MJ off the court, the golf stories, the gambling stories, just kind of giving him more of a personality that I didn't know before. Because I just, like I said earlier, I only knew him about the drive to win and how good he was as a basketball player. So kind of seeing those stories and learning more about just who he was and how that transitioned into today, him as a billionaire and a team owner, just seeing how that's all transitioned. I think that was the coolest takeaway for me. Now you have LeBron, who goes into zero dark 30 mode and turns off all his social media during the playoffs and reads The Godfather and all that. And then you have Michael Jordan, who was playing golf the day of games and smoking cigars. I think the other thing similar to that is seeing the persona of all his teammates. I think that's one thing that until you actually see their interviews and hear them talk about their relationships with Michael on and off the court, that was a cool takeaway for me, just to see how they interacted with him.
Yeah, his own teammates revered him as a godlike figure. Like that's when that's next level.
Yeah, the dudes who see him every single day still see him as like this god. I think for me, the last episode, when they're talking about how Michael Jordan in the Bulls like shaped culture for the world, and like literally for the world, and like played a massive role in pushing out American culture and like American pop culture. And I'm sure you guys have heard this soundbite a bunch, but like when Michael Jordan's coming on the Oprah Winfrey show, and she's like, the most famous man on the planet is here, and like everyone's freaking out, and like this is just like an athlete. This is like insane. And he didn't have, they made it like he didn't have Twitter or any social media thing. Like he wasn't trying to self-promote besides like his own like promotion deals that he was making. And he was just so iconic and so just like incredible. And I feel like every time I watched him, whether it was like getting on a plane or like going to practice, whatever it was, I'm like whatever he was wearing, I'm like, man, he just looks so cool.
Yeah.
Like he was wearing like the sweatshirt, like hoodie sweatshirt with like the long jacket, and I'm like, I wear that like right now. And he was doing that in like the early 90s. And I'm like, this dude is just so cool in like every way. And I mean, maybe not every way, he definitely has some dark spots, but like just the coolest person. And it blows my mind how much he impacted culture. And yeah, just incredible.
I'm honestly glad that they kind of did dive into some of those dark spots too, that it wasn't entirely just a promotion for him. Like,
yeah,
we got into some of the negative stuff. They didn't dwell on it. It's important to share that stuff too, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
This documentary was the greatest thing that happened during quarantine. I wish this was still going. I honestly could watch this for every weekend for the extended future. For 2 hours every week, I was legitimately excited beyond like even a normal sporting event. For some reason, this was like the coolest thing for me, just to learn all this stuff. So I'm glad this is something we got to enjoy. I'm glad we all got to enjoy it together. That's one of the things that I think made this so special, is like everybody was watching it together at the same time, and then everybody was talking about it at the same time, and everybody's doing this. Like, that's what I think is so cool about this whole thing. So I'm glad I got to talk about it with you guys. And I hope we get to have more of this soon. Maybe the Kobe, the MJ one. Or
if we shout encore.
Yeah, right.
I think we're gonna, because they've got to have some other footage.
There's some other footage, yeah.
There's got to be more.
Yeah, I wish they would release it as every interview they didn't keep, make it a podcast, just hours.
There's actually one thing of footage that I'm so angry they haven't released yet, and it's that Dream Team practice game.
Yeah.
Gone down in history as like the greatest basketball game ever. But
yeah.
I saw it. And Jason Hare, the director, talks about, he's like, we have like 2 hours of footage of this game. He's like, one day we like at lunch, we like got takeout food, and like 4 guys we just watched it for 2 hours. And I'm like,
amazing.
Why? I'm like, I've seen the same clips 1,000 times of that practice. Yeah. Like, why can you not give me that? If this is the greatest game of basketball ever played, please, like, please show me. Like, come on, you're killing me. So hopefully they do more stuff like that.
For sure.
Hopefully soon enough.
I think 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Sunday nights is like the 2 fastest hours of every week for me.
Yeah.
And that's going back to nothing to look forward to.
I mean, we my girlfriend and I, we literally, after the first episode, we watched Space Jam later that night. Yeah. Just like, because we wanted to keep the good times rolling.
I, as a little kid, I maybe should have said this, but I used to sleep with Space Jam, like the VHS.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Carried it around everywhere. I got like the special edition of the little gold coin that had the Monstars on one side and the Looney Tunes on the other, and like, so cool, incredible.
Awesome. This is what makes him so special. Is there's a million stories just like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for doing this.
Thank you.
Fun. I enjoyed everything. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Let's do this again soon. Yeah.
Talk to you soon, guys.